The task at hand is to imply various types of motion effects when none was recorded when the image was originally captured. For example, the effect of shooting a fast-moving subject with a slow shutter speed. This produces streaks of color that give an impression of movement, and sometimes the effect can be so strong that the shape of the subject becomes unclear. Or the effect of panning your camera in the same direction as a moving subject. The result is an image that's full of movement, and yet it's possible to see the actual subject in motion in some detail. And then there's everyday motion, wind-tossed leaves, breaking waves, billowing sheets hanging on a line. These don't ordinarily attract much attention, and yet a good motion shot of them can really catch your eye. Let's look at each one separately. Here's one of my favorite motion effects. It's very subtle. I'm going to introduce the appearance of a very slight flutter in the sail. I'll begin by duplicating the background layer. Next, I'll apply the blur to the whole area and then selectively mask it off to reveal the effect in some parts of the image only. I use the radial blur option for this. Choose Filter, Blur, Radial Blur, and select the Spin option and the best quality. Enter a medium-low value because you want to keep this effect subtle. And now we'll enter the Quick Mask mode to build our dynamic mask. Select the Linear Gradient tool and set the Blend mode to Multiply. Next, set white to be the foreground color and black the background. Now draw gradients around the gray area that you wish to show the blur in and close in very slowly around it. When you'd like to preview the selection, type Q on the keyboard. Now click the Layer Mask icon to use this mask to reveal a very slight flutter in the sails. And this is what we built up in the process. We can now compare the motion effect we added to the original image. This was before, and this is after the very subtle motion effect. In the next example, we'll look at a motion effect that's similar to the one produced by a fast-moving subject captured with a slow shutter speed on the camera. I'll use the same radial blur filter to simulate the effect, with a specialized mask to provide the blurs in certain areas only. This is a selection of both horses that I started out with. By dragging a black to white gradient in the multiply mode, I was able to mask out the top right area. When viewed in conjunction with the color data, you can see how any motion blur filter applied through the selection would primarily affect the young colt, and less so the white horse. I then shaded the alpha channel with a bit more to block other parts of the horse from being affected. By now you've probably figured out that a large part of customizing special effects lies in choosing an appropriate tool and then setting up a really good mask. Now I'll load the last channel we saw and float the image data to a new layer. Here I've isolated the areas where I wish to show intense motion. Now choose Blur, Radial Blur, and again choose the spin option and the best quality. This time I'll use a higher value. And move the blur center to the top left area. This will maximize the appearance of movement where the young colt is located in the image. And here's a quick before and after view. To bring a small area of the blurred image back into focus, select the History palette and set the history source to the state just prior to the radial blur. Then use the history brush at a lower opacity and paint in some detail. And here we have a completed motion effect.